Representing the great state of Vermont, as John indicated, I am the longest-serving independent in American congressional history. I served 16 years in the House and as Vermont's lone congressman, and in 2006 I was elected to the Senate and re-elected in 2012.
In terms of what we did in Burlington, we brought groups together who had a lot of common interests. We won. And I should tell you that I defeated a 5-term Democratic incumbent, okay? Defeated a Democrat. When I ran for, and they said, the Democrats, oh God, how did that happen? We'll get them next time, this is a fluke. Well, next time a Democrat and a Republican ran, and we beat them pretty badly. Next time a Democrat and a Republican ran, beat them pretty badly. Last time I ran, they combined both parties around one candidate. We beat them as well. But here's the point, John, to kind of turn what you said a little bit on its head. Yes, you got to bring people together to win elections. But what John is referring to is, I often say, you know, I'm proud of a lot of what I've accomplished in Burlington and Washington and so forth. But I often think back that in 1981, when I won, 1983, we have 2-year terms, I ran for re-election, we came close to doubling the voter turnout in those 2 years. Came close to doubling the voter turnout. How did we do that? Well, what we did is pay attention to the needs of low-income and working people. Historically, their streets were paved last. Snow was removed from their neighborhoods last. Their kids didn't have after-school programs. They did not have access to the waterfront, whatever it may be. We paid attention, and you know what? At the end of 2 years, people said, I didn't know that. Government can actually do something for me. I'm going to come out and vote.
One of the first votes in the House that I cast was against the first Gulf War. I believe that history will record that that was the right vote, as was the vote I cast years later against the war in Iraq, a war which I consider to be one of the worst foreign policy blunders in the modern history of our country.
The Republicans who voted for the war in Iraq, voted for the war in Afghanistan, voted for tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires, voted for a Medicare Part D prescription drug program without paying for any of that. And then Obama became president, and you know what? They were really worried about the deficit. Oh my God! We got to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, kids programs. We have this terrible deficit. And the media and many of us have allowed them to get away with that.
Today, there are nearly 44 million Americans living below the poverty line, and that is the largest number on record. Since the year 2000, nearly 12 million more Americans have slipped into poverty. Now, I understand that generally from a political point of view, it's not terribly wise to be talking about poverty. Poor people don't vote in many cases. Poor people certainly do not make campaign contributions. So from a political point of view, we kind of push them aside as not being relevant. But that's not what I think this country is supposed to be about. I regard it as unacceptable that you have major corporations in this country who make billions of dollars in profit, who do not pay a nickel in federal income tax because, among other things, they stash their money in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda and other tax havens. The wealthiest people in this country and the largest corporations have got to join the United States of America. They've got to come back to this country, and they've got to maintain and respect their responsibilities. And their responsibilities are not to ship jobs to China. Their responsibilities are not to avoid paying federal taxes. So we need real tax reform, which says to the wealthiest people and largest corporations, you're going to have to start paying your fair share of taxes.
Should everybody have a right to health care? The answer is yes. Should everybody, regardless of their income, be able to get as much education as they need? The answer is yes. In the United States, when you have a baby, we managed some years ago to do the Family and Medical Leave Act, and you get 3 months off if you work for a large company without pay. How many Americans know that all over the world, women get 6, 8 months off with 3/4 pay in order to bond with their babies? When you get old, you should have strong retirement security, stronger than we have right now. So, EJ, capitalism, does a lot of good things. It creates wealth. You got a lot of vibrant small businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs who are coming up with fantastic ideas. That is great. But we cannot, at the end of that process, have a situation where a handful of people own so much and so many people have so little. So the government plays a very important role in making sure that all of our people have the opportunity to succeed in life.
In my faith is that, it maybe gets back to the Bible in that you would like other people to do to you as you do to them, that we are one world, one people, that I am impacted negatively if there are hungry children in America, that I just don't think what human life is about is, making billions and billions of dollars and ignoring the reality around me. I have 7 grandchildren. They have beautiful kids. Why would I not fight as hard as I can to make sure that the planet that they inhabit
is a good planet. To me, it's just so obvious. I think what we have right now is an ideology out there that says, you know what life is about? You've got to make as much money as you can, and you've got to push down everybody around you. And if kids go hungry and if people sleeping out on the street, not your problem. All that you have to worry about is yourself. I would not like to live a life with that belief. I really would not.
Clearly, we need a fundamental rethinking of education. Probably at the first level, you know what we need to do is determine that education and intellectual activity is actually important. Not quite as important as football. Let's agree on that. But somewhere up there. I was in South Carolina, in Charlotte, South Carolina, meeting with high school teachers. And they were great. And they got up and they said, it's not just the money that bothers us. Is we work really, really hard and we don't get a whole lot of respect. All right. So we got to respect education. And we have to thank teachers. And thank you, by the way. Not an easy job. And this is also what we have to learn. Every psychologist who ever studied the issue tells us that the most formative years of a human being's life are what? 0 to 3. And you know what? We pay child care workers in this country. We pay them lower than McDonald's workers. They don't have health care. They should be some of the best paid. When you talk about a revolution in America, if you believe in your kids, those should be some of the best paid, best trained people in America. And if the question is, do I believe in no child left behind and testing and testing and testing? No, I do not. But the other thing also that we have to do is if kids know, kids learn at a very early age, really early age. What age kids do you teach? 8th grade special ed, all right. That's a special thank you. Kids in the 8th grade, they got to figure it out already. They know if they're going to go to college. They know if they're going to make it to the middle class or not. Think about what America would look like if every kid in this country, regardless of the income of his or her family, knew that if he or she studied hard, worked hard, that kid would be able to go to college and make it to the middle class. What a very different country we would be in.
Since 1999, the typical middle-class family, that family right in the middle of the economy, has seen its income go down by almost $5,000 after adjusting for inflation. Incredibly, that family earned less income last year than it did 26 years ago, back in 1989. The median male worker, that guy right in the middle of the economy, made $783 less last year than he did 42 years ago. The percentage of income going to the top 1% nearly tripled since the 1970s. In the mid-1970s, the top 1% earned about 8% of all income. In the 1980s, that figure jumped to 14%. In the late 1990s, that 1% earned about 19%. And today, as the middle class collapses, top 1% earns 23.5% of all income, more than the bottom 50%. Today, if you can believe it, the top 1/10 of 1% earns about 12 cents of every dollar earned in America. We talk about a lot of things on the floor of the Senate, but somehow we forget to talk about the reality of who is winning in this economy and who is losing. It is the struggle of Americans, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, women and men, gay and straight, struggling for decent jobs and the income to adequately take care of their families, struggling for retirement security, struggling for a decent education for their kids, struggling for health care, struggling for dignity, against the greed and power of a few on top who apparently want it all. Is the fact that as a result of the disastrous Supreme Court decision on Citizens United, we now have a political situation where billionaires are literally able to buy elections and candidates. Let's not kid ourselves. That is the reality right now. So you got the Koch brothers and other billionaire families now prepared to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in elections to buy the candidates of their choice, often extreme right-wing candidates. I'm the former chairman of the Senate Veterans Committee, and I can tell you I don't believe that the men and women who defended American democracy fought to create a situation where billionaires own the political process.
People do not understand what their money is about. The Koch brothers today are worth $80 billion. Some people say more. Under the very oppressive economic regime of Barack Obama, which has strangled free enterprise in America, their wealth grew by $12 billion last year. Obama and Mitt Romney in the last presidential election each spent a little bit more than $1 billion on their campaigns. These guys made $12 billion more last year. For them to spend $2 billion or $5 billion is like you going out for dinner. It is chump change.
The time is now to stand together with workers of all stripes to say enough is enough. The United States government has got to start representing the middle class and working families in this country and not just the billionaires.
So it seems to me, Mr. President, that what we have got to do is start listening to the needs of working families, the vast majority of our people, and not just the people who make campaign contributions. And I know that's a very radical idea. I do know that. But, it might be a good idea to try a little bit to reaffirm the faith of the American people in their democratic form of government. Let them know just a little bit that maybe we are hearing their pain, their unemployment, their debt, the fact they're losing their houses, the fact that they don't have any health care, the fact they can't afford to send their kids to college. Maybe, just maybe, we might want to listen to them before we go running out to another fundraising event with millionaires and billionaires. I do know, Mr. President, that is a radical idea. Let's talk about
I happen to have a lot of respect and personal affection for Barack Obama. I think history will judge him in a lot kinder way than his contemporaries have. And I think that as a politician, he has won campaigns that will also make the history book, especially his first one. But if you were to ask me, and I think I've told him this, so I'm not telling you any secrets, what his major mistake has been is that he thought that after putting together this extraordinary grassroots movement of young people, minorities, working class people, putting together that coalition, and getting elected to the presidency, and then he thought he could sit down with Republicans and negotiate all of these fine agreements. He was mistaken. The only way that any president in this day and age taking on the billionaire class can succeed, the only possible way, is to mobilize tens of millions of people to say to Congress, guess what? This is what you are doing. You are going to raise the minimum wage. You are going to create millions of jobs. You are going to protect our veterans and our seniors. You're not going to give tax breaks to the rich. You are going to make college affordable. And we are watching you. And if you don't vote for this legislation, you're not going to return to office. What I will say with 100% certainty, that if we continue to have elections in which 63% of the people don't vote, 80% of young people don't vote, then the rich will only get richer and will continue to dominate what goes on here in Washington. So regardless of one's political views, if we sat in this room, Mark, 30 years ago, and I would say to you, I think our country, which has a terrible history of racial prejudice, say in the year 2008, would elect an African-American president of the United States, and what the hell, maybe re-elect him 4 years later, that we would overcome our racism and do that, you would have said, what are you smoking? It ain't going to happen. That's what you would have said. We did it. We did it. 30, 40 years ago, you had 1 or 2 members of the United States Senate who were women. Today, we have had states where governor is a woman, senators are women, members of Congress are women, and while we still have a long, long way to go to break down sexist barriers in this country, nobody would deny that we have come a long way. I remember when I was mayor, I appointed the first woman police officer back in the 1980s. What a big deal that was. Walk around Capitol Hill today, it's not such a big deal. Overcome huge barriers in terms of sexism. Disability issues. When you and I were kids and families had a baby born with a disability, there was an embarrassment in the part of the family. Kids were institutionalized. Today, we have come a long, long way as a result of the ADA and other programs where kids with disability are loved and welcomed into our schools. They're part of our community. We have made more progress on that than anyone would have dreamed of. And last but certainly not least, and I know this firsthand because the state of Vermont helped lead the effort with regard to civil unions. If you and I were talking 10 years ago, and you said, I think in maybe some of the more conservative states in America, gay marriage would no longer be a big deal in the year 2015. You would have thought that would be completely crazy, right? And yet, I go to schools in the state of Vermont, I go to the conservative parts of the state, and I ask kids, well, what do you think about gay marriage? And they look at me like I'm crazy. What are you talking about? What's the problem? Not a problem. So you ask me about optimism, those are the areas, some of the areas, where we have now taken it for granted. Yeah, you got a black president in the United States, so what? 20, 30 years ago, nobody dreamed that would be possible. So I believe we have the capacity to change. I believe that in a democracy, what elections are about are serious debates over serious issues, not political gossip, not making campaigns into soap operas. This is not the Red Sox versus the Yankees. This is the debate over major issues facing the American people. Honest people. My conservative friends differ with me, and that's fine. That's called democracy. That's a good thing. In the first 24 hours of our campaign, we have raised $1.5 million. Yeah. And here's how we did it. We did it with 35,000 people contributing
an average of $43. How's that?